They always said the Johnsons had it all. To anyone driving down the quiet, tree-lined streets of Maplewood Estates, the two-story colonial house with the trimmed hedges, American flag, and red door looked like a postcard of suburban perfection. Inside lived Emma Johnson, a 35-year-old elementary school teacher known for her warm smile and devotion to her two young children. Her husband, Derek Johnson, was a partner at a prestigious law firm in Houston, respected in the legal world for his intellect and composure. Together, they were the image of success, a power couple with a solid marriage, bright children, and what seemed to be a shared future built on trust, laughter, and love. To Emma, that life wasn't just a performance, it was real. Or so she believed. She had met Derek in college. She was a bright-eyed education major who volunteered at after-school programs. He was a driven law student, already dressed like a young associate and walking like he belonged in a courtroom. Their connection had been instant, passionate, inspiring, intense. Within a year, they married, ready to face the world as partners. 15 years later, that fire hadn't disappeared. Or at least, Emma told herself it hadn't. There were busy weeks and long nights, certainly. Derek often worked late, long hours at the firm, important deals, endless phone calls, but when he came home, he still kissed her on the cheek and asked about her day. Their kids, Lucas and Maya, aged 8 and 5, were her everything. She loved their chaos, their questions, their messy art projects and bedtime giggles. She saw herself as the glue of the family, the one who made the house feel like home. Emma's mother, Sylvia Miller, had moved to Houston just 3 years earlier to be closer to the grandkids. At 58, Sylvia was still vibrant, well-dressed, sharp, and charming in a way that often made strangers assume she was Emma's older sister rather than her mother. She visited often, bringing baked goods, helping with school pickups, and sharing long cups of tea with her daughter. Emma confided in her, as she always had, ever since she was a child. Sylvia was her sounding board, her emotional compass, her best friend. So when things started to change, Emma didn't panic. At first, the signs were subtle. Derek stopped suggesting their usual Friday night movie marathons. He started taking more work trips on weekends, something that had never been part of their routine. He became less affectionate, less present. At dinner, his smile felt thinner, like it was stretched over something he was hiding. Emma tried not to overthink it. She knew how stressful Derek's job could be. Corporate law was high pressure, and he'd always taken his career seriously. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe he needed space. Still, the unease began to creep in. One Sunday morning, as she was folding laundry, she noticed Derek had taken his phone into the bathroom with him, something he'd never done before. He started guarding it, turning it face down when they were together, keeping it in his pocket even while relaxing at home. She told herself not to jump to conclusions. "Don't be paranoid," she whispered under her breath more than once. "He's not that kind of man." And yet, the feeling lingered. A quiet ache. A whisper in the back of her mind. She turned to Sylvia for advice. "I think something's wrong," Emma admitted one afternoon while they were baking cookies in the kitchen. "He's distant, different." Sylvia stirred the batter slowly and gave her a soft look. "Marriage goes through phases, honey. You've got 2 kids, demanding jobs, sometimes people just need time to breathe. Don't push too hard." Emma nodded, grateful for the reassurance. Her mother was probably right. She always had a way of calming her down. But a week later, Derek left his phone unattended on the kitchen counter, a rare occurrence lately, and a message lit up the screen. It was from Sylvia. Just 6 words, "I can't wait to see you." Emma froze. Her first reaction was confusion. Maybe it was about the grandkids. Maybe they had planned something together, a surprise for her, perhaps. But her gut said otherwise. Hands trembling, heart pounding, Emma picked up the phone. There was no password. Derek had never bothered to set one. She opened the thread. And what she found shattered her world. The messages between Derek and her mother were not just casual, or even suggestive, they were explicit, filled with longing, passion, and the kind of secrets that no daughter should ever have to read. Emma's eyes blurred with tears as she scrolled through weeks, months, of messages. Plans to sneak away. Descriptions of moments shared in hotel rooms. Promises to keep the affair hidden from everyone, especially Emma. I love the way you touch me. No one makes me feel the way you do. Your daughter has no idea. That last message made her gasp out loud. The room spun. She felt like she was going to vomit. Her mother. Her own mother. Emma dropped the phone on the counter like it had burned her skin. Her legs nearly gave out beneath her. The betrayal was so deep, so surreal, that for a moment she questioned whether she was dreaming, or losing her mind. But this was real. The man she married. The woman who raised her. Together. In secret. Emma sat alone in the kitchen long after the sun had risen and fallen again, the house silent around her. The same home where she'd once felt safe, filled with laughter and the scent of cookies and bedtime stories, now felt cold. Haunted. A stage where every smile had been a lie. She hadn't cried, not in the way people do in movies. No screams, no shattering of plates, no dramatic collapse to the floor. Just a quiet unraveling. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the messages again. She told herself she needed to understand the full scope of the betrayal, but each new text was another dagger to the heart. She couldn't bring herself to delete them. For hours she sat there, breathing shallowly, fingers trembling, reading and rereading the evidence of a secret world that existed just beneath the surface of her own life. The affair had been going on for months. Maybe longer. There were references to weekends Emma remembered, times when Derek had claimed he was on business trips, when Sylvia had offered to watch the kids. It all made sense now. Too much sense. She wanted to confront them both immediately. She wanted to call her mother and scream. To drive to Derek's office and demand answers. To burn everything down. But something inside her told her to wait. To be patient. This wasn't just about pain, it was about truth. She needed to know everything. She needed control, even if it was the only thing she had left. So Emma did what she had never done before in her marriage. She kept a secret. She wiped her tears, put the phone back exactly where she'd found it, and carried on as if nothing had happened. When Derek came home that evening, she smiled. She asked about his day. She kissed his cheek. She poured him a drink and listened as he talked about a new case at the firm. He never noticed the slight tremble in her hands, or the way she avoided looking directly into his eyes for too long. That night, as he slept beside her, peacefully, as if he were still the man she once loved, Emma reached for his phone again. It was still unlocked. And the evidence kept piling up. Each night, she became a silent detective. She took photos of the messages and saved them in a hidden folder on her own phone. She memorized the dates, the patterns. The times they met, the hotels, the sickening details of their conversations. Her world was crumbling, but her focus grew sharper with every passing day. She stopped seeing Sylvia altogether. Any invitation to brunch or a visit with the kids was politely declined. "I'm just really busy with work," she'd say, smiling through gritted teeth. Sylvia, sensing a shift, began texting more frequently, concerned messages layered with guilt disguised as affection. "Is everything okay, sweetheart? I feel like something's wrong between us." Emma ignored them all. She couldn't bring herself to answer. Not yet. She didn't want apologies. She wanted answers. She wanted to understand how they had done this to her, and why. By July, the silence in the Johnson house had become deafening. Emma's mind never stopped racing. Derek could feel something was off, that much was obvious, but he never dared to ask. Maybe he didn't want the answer. Maybe he believed that if he said nothing, the cracks in their marriage would somehow seal themselves. But they didn't. They only deepened. On the night of July 14th, a strange stillness settled over the house. The kids had spent the weekend at a sleepover with cousins. The house was too quiet, too still. Derek sat in the living room, scrolling through his tablet, feigning interest in the news. Emma moved around the kitchen with mechanical precision, preparing dinner neither of them would really eat. Her heart pounded in her chest. Her palms were damp. She had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure if she could go through with it. After the dishes were cleared and the lights dimmed, she stood silently at the sliding door to the backyard, staring out into the warm summer night. Behind her, Derek sipped a glass of wine. His feet were propped up on the ottoman. On the surface, it looked like a scene of marital peace. It wasn't. Emma turned slowly. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was quiet, but cold, like glass about to break. Derek looked up, his brow furrowed. "Okay, sure. What's up?" She took a breath that felt like it might shatter her ribs. "I know about you and my mother." The words landed in the air like a loaded gun. Derek froze. The tablet slipped from his fingers and hit the carpet with a dull thud. He opened his mouth, closed it again, his face draining of color. "Emma, wait. It's not." "Don't," she said sharply, raising a hand. "I've seen everything. The messages. The lies. The nights you spent together when I thought you were working. You've been screwing my mother, Derek. Just say it." He said nothing. She laughed, bitter, hollow. "I trusted you. I trusted her. And the two of you, you destroyed everything." Still, he remained silent, eyes wide, jaw clenched. Emma shook her head, disgusted by the sight of him. She didn't cry. Not anymore. She was too far gone for tears. She turned and opened the sliding door, stepping out into the backyard. The air was thick with summer humidity. She wrapped her arms around herself and stared at the stars, breathing deep, trying to stay grounded, trying not to lose control. But inside the house, Derek's mind was unraveling. He sat alone, staring at the spot where she had stood, his heart racing, a storm of panic rising in his chest. She knew everything. And now, the nightmare he'd always feared, the exposure, the humiliation, the loss of everything he'd built, was no longer just a possibility. It was happening. He rose from the couch slowly, as if in a trance. His hands were shaking. His thoughts were loud, deafening. "She'll tell the kids," he thought. "She'll tell my firm. She'll ruin me." He walked to the door and slid it open. Emma didn't hear him. She was standing near the edge of the yard, staring out into the dark. He moved behind her, silently, like a shadow. And then, without warning, he lunged. Emma didn't hear the door slide open behind her. She didn't hear Derek's footsteps across the wooden deck or the slow, measured pace of a man whose world was caving in. She was too lost in her thoughts, too consumed by the storm raging inside her to notice anything outside the rhythm of her own shattered breathing. She stood near the edge of the lawn, arms wrapped tightly around herself, staring at the dark silhouette of trees that framed the backyard. The cicadas hummed in the warm night air. A soft breeze rustled the hedges. The stars blinked indifferently overhead. And then, in an instant, everything changed. There was a presence behind her. Too close. Too fast. She turned, barely a second before Derek's hand clamped over her mouth, cutting off her scream before it could escape into the air. His other hand went for her throat. The force of the grip knocked her off balance. Her body twisted violently as her feet scraped at the grass, trying to gain traction. She clawed at his arms, kicked backward, desperate to break free, but Derek held on. The rage in his eyes had melted into something darker, fear, desperation, the wild chaos of a man who had already made a choice and now couldn't take it back. Emma tried to gasp, but no sound came out. Her lungs screamed for air. Her fingers thrashed at his forearms, her nails digging into flesh. Her knees buckled. Her body convulsed. And still, he didn't let go. Everything slowed. Her vision dimmed. Her heart pounded a final, frantic rhythm before the world collapsed into stillness. It was over in less than a minute. Derek stood in the middle of the backyard, breathing heavily, staring down at his wife's lifeless body as though it belonged to someone else. His hands were shaking, his mouth slightly open, as if even he couldn't believe what he'd done. Emma lay motionless in the grass, her eyes open, lips parted in a silent final breath. The bruises around her neck were unmistakable. The cicadas sang on, indifferent. The stars didn't blink. Derek collapsed to his knees beside her. For a moment, he reached out as if to touch her face, but pulled back, afraid, not of her, but of the finality. The horror. This was no longer a betrayal. This was murder. And there was no way to undo it. He sat in the dark for hours, motionless. Then, as the first faint glow of dawn crept into the sky, Derek rose, wiped the sweat from his forehead, and slowly walked back into the house. He locked the sliding door behind him. Then he waited. The 911 call came not from Derek, but from a neighbor. It was 6:17 a.m. when Detective Caroline Brooks, a veteran of the Houston Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit, pulled up to the Johnson residence. The call had come in as a possible death. The neighbor said she saw a body in the yard, a woman, not moving. Something felt wrong. Detective Brooks had been through more crime scenes than she could count. But something about this neighborhood, the manicured lawns, the quiet, early morning stillness, made the hair on her arms stand up. She knocked on the front door. Derek answered. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes red, as though he hadn't slept, or had been crying. He stood stiffly on the threshold, his hands trembling slightly. "My wife," he said softly. "She's in the backyard." Brooks narrowed her eyes. "What happened?" "I don't know. I found her there this morning." She said nothing, motioning for the officers behind her to secure the scene. Forensics techs began taping off the perimeter while two uniformed officers moved into the backyard. Moments later, one of them returned, his expression grim. "She's dead. Strangulation marks. No signs of blood. Looks like it happened sometime last night." Brooks nodded and stepped inside. The house was clean. Too clean. No signs of struggle. No blood. No overturned furniture. It didn't look like a crime scene. But she'd seen this before, the calm after chaos. She turned to Derek. "Where were you last night?" He blinked. I was here. The kids were with Emma's sister. I went to bed early. I didn't see her until I woke up." "You didn't hear anything?" He shook his head, avoiding eye contact. Brooks made a mental note. Too composed. Too quiet. Too clean. "We're going to need to ask you some more questions," she said calmly. "But first, I need to speak with some neighbors." By late morning, the story was spreading like wildfire. A beloved elementary school teacher, found dead in her backyard. No forced entry. No robbery. Just a lifeless body on the grass, and a husband with too many holes in his story. When the coroner confirmed strangulation, the case turned from a mystery into a manhunt, not for a stranger, but for the truth hiding behind closed doors. Emma's phone was recovered quickly. On it, detectives found dozens of messages, not just between her and Derek, but also between Emma and her best friend, Natalie Ross. The last message, dated 2 days before the murder, read: "I found out about the affair. Derek and my mother. I don't even know how to breathe right now. It was the crack that opened everything." Detective Brooks called Natalie in for questioning. Natalie sat with her arms wrapped around herself, tears in her eyes. She was devastated, she said. She didn't know what to do. She told me about the messages. That they'd been going behind her back for months. She felt betrayed by both of them. Did she ever say she confronted them? Brooks asked. She was planning to. She said she had to do it. That she couldn't keep pretending. That was all Brooks needed. She ordered a forensic team to extract deleted messages from Derek's phone. With a warrant, they accessed everything: the affair, the hotels, the messages between Derek and Sylvia. It was all there. Every word. Every plan. Every secret. Detective Brooks brought Derek back into the station. He looked thinner now, hollow, like a balloon with all the air drained out. He sat in the interrogation room in silence for 20 minutes before Brooks even entered. When she finally did, she sat down across from him without saying a word. Just looked at him. After a long pause, she said, "We know about the affair, Derek. We know what Emma found. And we know she confronted you." He looked down at his hands. His fingers twitched on the table. "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "It just happened." "What happened?" "I panicked." She said she was going to tell everyone. "The kids. My firm. I saw everything falling apart. I didn't know what to do." Brooks stayed calm. "So you strangled her?" Derek didn't answer. But he didn't deny it. That was enough. The walls of the interrogation room were closing in. Derek sat motionless, hands folded in his lap, eyes bloodshot and distant. Gone was the calm, polished attorney who had once commanded courtrooms and boardrooms. What remained was a shell of a man, one who had spent months lying to the people he was supposed to protect, and in the end, had taken a life to protect a secret he could never control. Detective Caroline Brooks watched him in silence. "I didn't plan it," he murmured, as if the words could soften the horror of what he'd done. "I didn't go out there thinking I was going to hurt her. I lost control." Brooks nodded slowly, but there was no sympathy in her eyes. "And you never called for help? Never tried to resuscitate her? You just waited?" Derek's voice cracked. "I thought if I acted normal, maybe it would all just..." He didn't finish. There was nothing left to say. The confession was recorded. Charges were filed. Murder in the first degree. But Brooks wasn't finished. There was still one more person she needed to talk to, the woman at the other end of the betrayal. When Sylvia Miller walked into the station 2 days later, her appearance was impeccable, her hair perfectly styled, her blazer crisp, her lipstick subtle but precise. She had the look of a woman who didn't break easily. But Detective Brooks could see it in her eyes: guilt, fear, and something else, a gnawing awareness that whatever protection she thought she had was gone. "Please, have a seat," Brooks said calmly, motioning toward the chair across from her. Sylvia sat, legs crossed tightly, clutching her handbag like a lifeline. "I assume you know why you're here." Sylvia nodded. Her voice was barely audible. "Emma's gone." Brooks let the silence hang. "She was my daughter," Sylvia whispered. "She was everything. And yet you slept with her husband." That landed like a slap. Sylvia closed her eyes. Her jaw clenched. "I didn't mean for it to happen." "Then tell me how it did." Sylvia took a long, shaking breath. "It started after I moved to Houston. I was lonely. Derek was kind. Attentive. It was wrong, I know. I told him we had to stop, more than once. But he kept pulling me back in. You're saying he manipulated you? Sylvia looked up. I'm saying we were both guilty. But I never thought he'd hurt her. I swear on my life, I never thought he was capable of that. But he was. And now your daughter is dead. Because neither of you told the truth. Sylvia broke then. Not in a scream or a sob, but in a quiet, pitiful unraveling. Her shoulders trembled. Her mascara smudged. She covered her mouth with one hand and shook her head over and over like she was trying to erase the past by sheer force. She was my baby, she choked. I was supposed to protect her. Brooks stood and walked to the door. You'll need a lawyer, she said simply, and stepped out. In the weeks that followed, the case of Emma Johnson's murder consumed Houston. It was front-page news, late-night podcast fodder, trending on social media. The headlines read like fiction. Husband kills wife after secret affair with her mother. Tragedy in Maplewood, family torn apart by betrayal and murder. People were glued to every development. When the court proceedings began, the courtroom was packed. Derek Johnson sat in a navy blue suit that no longer fit quite right. His hands were cuffed. His gaze never rose above the table in front of him. He pled guilty to second-degree murder, but the prosecution pushed for first-degree, citing the calculated deception, the motive, the confession, and most importantly, the cold decision to let Emma die in silence. The messages between Derek and Sylvia were read aloud in court. The jurors flinched. Some shook their heads. Others stared blankly, as if trying to process the emotional gravity of what they were hearing. When Natalie Ross took the stand, she broke down halfway through her testimony. She told me everything, she said through tears. She said she couldn't even look at herself in the mirror after finding out. And still, she tried to keep it together for the kids. She loved them more than anything. When Detective Brooks testified, her voice was even and steady. She confronted her husband the night of the murder. We believe the confrontation triggered a violent response, one he had full control over. He made a choice. As for Sylvia, she never took the stand. Her attorney entered a plea deal for obstruction and emotional complicity. The prosecution decided not to charge her with accessory to murder, citing insufficient evidence that she had knowledge of Derek's intent to harm Emma. But in the court of public opinion, Sylvia was damned. Outside the courthouse, a woman screamed at her as she exited on the third day of trial. You killed your daughter just as much as he did. Sylvia didn't respond. She kept walking, sunglasses covering her eyes, but no mask could hide the shame that clung to her like a second skin. In the end, Derek Johnson was sentenced to 55 years in prison without the possibility of parole. When the verdict was read, the courtroom fell into a thick, unbearable silence. Sylvia sat in the back, trembling, alone. Lucas and Maya, the children at the heart of it all, were placed in the custody of Emma's sister. They would grow up knowing that their father killed their mother, and that their grandmother had loved him in a way no mother ever should. There was no justice that could make that right. Outside the courthouse, the sky was gray. Detective Caroline Brooks stood near the steps, watching reporters scramble for interviews, bystanders whisper, and families clutch one another. Another case closed. Another family destroyed. She'd seen 100 tragedies in her years on the force, but this one stayed with her. Not just because of the betrayal. But because no one, not even Emma, ever saw it coming. It was a story about secrets. About silence. About how the people we trust most can become the ones who ruin us. And how sometimes, the worst monsters are the ones who sleep in our beds, or sit at our kitchen tables.